The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of Eastville Courthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floors. The usual buzz of activity was tinged with an unusual tension today, an electric charge in the air that made every footstep echo louder than usual. Inside these solemn walls, a story was about to unfold that would expose deep wounds beneath the surface of a community struggling with justice, power, and prejudice. Lisa Freeman, 40, walked steadily through the halls of the courthouse, her posture calm but resolute. She wasn't just another official today. She was the newly appointed Police Chief of Eastville, a position she had earned through decades of dedication and relentless perseverance. As an African-American woman, in a role historically dominated by others, her presence alone was a symbol of change. But change often meets resistance, and Lisa knew this all too well. Lisa's journey to this moment had been far from easy. From growing up in a neighborhood marked by systemic inequalities, to rising through the ranks in a male-dominated, often hostile environment she had fought for every inch of her career. She had faced discrimination, isolation, and countless moments where the odds were stacked against her. But her spirit was unbreakable, fueled by a fierce commitment to justice and a vision of a police force that truly served all its citizens fairly. As she made her way through the courthouse corridors, the weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her. Today's meeting was critical, a public hearing that would put her leadership under scrutiny. But more than that, it was a test of whether the system she was trying to reform was willing to confront its own flaws. Suddenly, from around the corner stepped Officer James Carter, 40, a man whose reputation preceded him. Carter had long been the subject of complaints for racial bias and aggressive behavior, yet he remained untouchable thanks to a culture of silence and protection within the department. His eyes locked onto Lisa with a cold, hard glare. Without warning, Carter stepped directly into her path. "Hold up," he said sharply, his tone dripping with disdain. "Who do you think you are, walking around like you own the place without showing some ID?" Lisa's breath caught, not because she was intimidated, but because she knew exactly what this was. A deliberate power play. A challenge masked as protocol. "I am Chief Lisa Freeman," she responded firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm here to uphold the law and protect our community. I expect the same respect I give to others." Her words hung heavy in the air. Carter's surprise was brief, quickly replaced by a sneer. He raised his voice, refusing to acknowledge her authority, his words laced with condescension and threat. The hallway seemed to grow colder, the space between them charged with the unspoken history of mistrust and inequality. Witnesses nearby froze, some instinctively pulling out their phones to capture the confrontation. Their cameras recorded every harsh word, every dismissive gesture. The tension was palpable not just between Lisa and Carter, but between a system grappling with its own identity and the people it was supposed to serve. The incident ignited something larger than the two of them. As the video spread across social media, outrage rippled through Eastville and beyond. Voices that had been silenced for too long found strength in shared outrage. Conversations about systemic racism and accountability erupted in neighborhoods, homes, and public forums. Lisa's confrontation with Officer Carter was more than a personal challenge. It was a mirror reflecting the deep fractures in law enforcement and society. It exposed how authority, when wielded without accountability, could become a tool of oppression rather than protection. For Lisa, this moment was a catalyst. Her calm defiance became a beacon of hope for those demanding change. It reminded everyone listening that courage could pierce through layers of injustice and that the fight for fairness was far from over. This story sets the stage for a powerful journey, one filled with conflict resilience and ultimately the pursuit of justice that resonates far beyond the courthouse walls. Before we get started, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from and what time it is. We'd love to see how far this story has traveled and who it's touched along the way. All right, let's jump right into the story. Chapter. Officer James Carter was not a man unknown to controversy. At 40 years old, his career in the Eastville Police Department spanned over 15 years, a period marked by numerous complaints, whispered rumors, and quiet discontent among the community and even his colleagues. Yet remarkably, Carter had managed to evade any serious disciplinary actions. His file was thick with allegations, accusations of racial profiling, excessive force, verbal abuse, and an unwavering arrogance that seemed to come with the badge. Despite this, Carter continued to patrol the streets. His authority unchecked, his behavior unchallenged. Carter's upbringing played a subtle yet undeniable role in shaping his worldview. Born and raised in a predominantly white suburb just outside Eastville, his exposure to diversity was limited, filtered through the lens of his community's often unspoken biases. This background, combined with the intense pressures of police work, created a mindset where suspicion was a default and empathy was an afterthought. Inside the police department, a culture of silence and loyalty reigned supreme. Officers were expected to have each other's backs no matter what. Complaints against fellow officers, especially those involving race or misconduct, were often brushed aside, minimized, or buried altogether. Carter thrived in this environment. His aggressive tactics were sometimes lauded as tough policing by superiors who prioritized order over justice. When internal affairs investigated findings, often lacked teeth, leaving Carter's actions unpunished and sending a message that certain behaviors were tolerated, even encouraged. But beyond the department's walls, Carter's reputation evoked fear and resentment. Many in Eastville's minority communities lived with the constant awareness that a run-in with officers like Carter could escalate quickly from a routine stop to a traumatic encounter. His history of targeting black individuals and using intimidation tactics left scars. Some visible, others hidden in the quiet corners of lives lived under scrutiny. In a rare moment of candor, Carter once confided in a trusted colleague during a late-night shift. "I'm just doing my job," he said, voice low but firm, keeping the streets safe. Sometimes that means making tough calls. His colleague nodded, understanding the pressure, but questioning the cost. That same colleague later reflected, "There's this unspoken code we protect our own. It's not about right or wrong. It's about survival in the force. If you step out of line, you come the target." And James, he learned to play the game well. This culture of complicity created an invisible barrier, preventing meaningful reform and accountability. It fostered an environment where officers like Carter could act with impunity, their prejudices and abuses shielded by the very institution meant to uphold justice. Yet Carter's story is not just about individual failings. It is a lens into a system deeply flawed. It reveals how unchecked power, lack of oversight, and cultural norms within police departments perpetuate cycles of discrimination and abuse. Understanding this environment is essential to grasp why moments like the confrontation with Chief Lisa Freeman erupt, carrying the weight of years of frustration and pain. As Carter's path crosses with Lisa's, the collision becomes inevitable, a clash not only of two individuals, but of two opposing visions rooted in change and accountability, the other in maintaining old broken ways. This confrontation will force a reckoning, exposing the true cost of silence and the urgent need for transformation. Through this story, we gain insight into the complexities of policing in America. The human faces behind headlines, the battles within departments, and the struggle for justice that echoes far beyond a single courthouse hallway. Lisa Freeman's first day as the newly appointed police chief of Eastville was filled with a mix of anticipation and quiet determination. At 45 years old, she had navigated a long and challenging path to reach this position, a journey marked by resilience, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice. In a police force long dominated by white men, Lisa stood as a symbol of change, a beacon of hope for many who had lost faith in the system. Growing up in a tough neighborhood, Lisa experienced firsthand the harsh realities faced by communities, often targeted unfairly by law enforcement. From an early age, she understood the sting of racial prejudice and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Her father, a community organizer, taught her the value of voice and action. "You have to be the change you want to see," he'd often remind her, words that echoed in her heart as she joined the police academy years later. Lisa's early years in the force were anything but easy. She faced skepticism and subtle hostility from colleagues who doubted a woman of color could lead with strength. She endured microaggressions and blatant racism, each incident a test of her resolve. Yet instead of retreating, Lisa harnessed these experiences, fueling her determination to transform the culture from within. Her reputation for fairness, transparency, and community engagement grew steadily. She wasn't just another officer. She was a bridge between law enforcement and the people it served. Lisa believed in accountability and saw policing not as a battle to be won, but a trust to be earned. When rumors circulated about her soft approach, she countered with results. Crime rates fell, community relations improved, and trust began to rebuild. But the road ahead was still treacherous. As the first black female police chief in Eastville's history, Lisa knew her every move would be scrutinized, every decision questioned. She also understood the systemic inertia she had to fight a department resistant to change, steeped in traditions that protected the powerful and marginalized, the vulnerable. Her office was a small but bright room in the police headquarters, adorned with family photos and plaques recognizing her years of service. One morning during a briefing, she addressed her team with calm authority. "We're here to protect and serve every member of this community. That means rooting out injustice wherever it lives, even if it's within our own ranks." Her words resonated with some officers who saw her as a leader who would finally bring long overdue reform. Others bristled uncomfortable with the disruption of the status quo. "Change is necessary," she often said, "but it won't come easy. We must be ready to face challenges head-on with integrity and courage." Lisa's leadership style was defined by listening as much as speaking. She held regular community forums, encouraging residents to share their stories. Stories of pain, hope, and sometimes betrayal. She understood that healing a fractured relationship between police and community required honesty and humility. Behind the scenes, Lisa worked tirelessly to overhaul training programs, emphasizing de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and bias awareness. She pushed for transparent investigation processes, refusing to let misconduct be swept under the rug. These efforts made her many enemies, including some within her own department, who preferred the old ways. Despite the pressure, Lisa found strength in her family and her faith. Her mother's letters, filled with encouragement and wisdom, hung above her desk. "You are the light in the darkness." One note read, "Never forget why you started this journey." Lisa's story was not just one of personal triumph, but of a broader movement, a reflection of America's ongoing struggle to reconcile its ideals with its realities. Her presence challenged the entrenched systems of power and prejudice, inspiring those who believed in justice and equality. As the new Chief Lisa Freeman represented more than authority. She embodied possibility, the possibility that change was not only necessary, but achievable. The weight on her shoulders was immense, but so was her resolve. And as her path inevitably crossed with Officer James Carter's, the collision would expose deep fractures within the force, setting the stage for a confrontation that would ripple far beyond Eastville's city limits. In the quiet moments before stepping into the spotlight, Lisa took a deep breath and reminded herself why she accepted this role. "I'm here for the people. I'm here for justice, and I will not back down." Washington Heights was a neighborhood perched on the edge, both literally and figuratively. Nestled on the northern tip of the city, it was a community largely composed of white working-class families. The houses, modest yet well-kept, lined the streets in neat rows, their porches offering a sense of safety and tradition to those who lived there. But beneath the calm exterior, a simmering tension lingered, an unspoken history of racial friction that had quietly shaped the neighborhood's identity for decades. For years, Washington Heights had carried the weight of unacknowledged divisions. The stories passed down through generations painted a portrait of a place where racial boundaries were drawn, not with signs, but with wary glances, whispered suspicions, and cautious interactions. Local businesses thrived on loyalty within ethnic enclaves, while others felt they were unwelcome outsiders just beneath the surface of polite conversation. Historically, the neighborhood had seen flashes of conflict that mirrored the broader struggles of the nation. In the late 1980s, a series of protests erupted after a black teenager was wrongfully accused of theft in a local store. The incident fractured community trust and left a scar that even time couldn't heal. More recently, an altercation involving a white officer and a young black man ignited heated debates and divided the residents into opposing camps, some defending the police, others demanding accountability. Amidst this backdrop, Washington Heights teetered on a knife's edge. The community was polarized, the undercurrents of fear and mistrust deepened by economic hardships and social change. Neighborhood meetings became battlegrounds where voices rose in anger and frustration, each side fighting to be heard, while the wounds of the past festered beneath the surface. Local leaders struggled to bridge the divide. Reverend Thomas Green, a respected figure in the community, often spoke about healing and unity, but his calls were met with mixed reactions. "We cannot move forward without acknowledging the pain," he would say during town halls, his voice steady yet filled with urgency. Ignoring the past only ensures it repeats itself. Economic shifts had also played their role in shaping Washington Heights' fragile equilibrium. Factories that once employed many of the neighborhood's residents had closed, leaving joblessness and uncertainty in their wake. These stresses amplified social divides as competition for scarce resources, often translated into racial tension. School board meetings reflected this strife vividly. Parents clashed over curriculum changes meant to include more diverse perspectives. While some embraced the initiative, others saw it as an unwanted intrusion, a threat to the traditional values they held dear. Children in these classrooms absorbed the contradictions, lessons of equality and justice, overshadowed by the realities of division in their own streets. Police presence in Washington Heights was heavy, but often contentious. Officers patrolled with a vigilance that felt more like occupation to many residents. Reports of racial profiling were common, further eroding trust. The local precinct was a microcosm of the larger national debate on policing and race, caught between maintaining order and respecting the rights of all citizens. Amidst this atmosphere of tension and unease, Lisa Freeman stepped into her role as police chief. She understood the challenges that lay ahead, not just within the department, but in the hearts of the community she was sworn to protect. Washington Heights was a place where history, fear, and hope collided, and it would take all her strength and diplomacy to navigate these treacherous waters. In preparation for her new role, Lisa studied the past incidents closely. She knew that the events simmering in Washington Heights were not isolated, but part of a patterns repeated in neighborhoods across the country. She reflected on the story of a young black man wrongly accused years ago, the protests that had followed the community divided between fear and justice. These stories were a warning, a lesson, and a call to action. As she walked the streets of Washington Heights in the weeks leading up to the fateful encounter that would soon capture national attention, Lisa felt the pulse of the neighborhood, the mix of hope and apprehension, the deep-seated pain beneath the surface civility. She heard whispers of old grievances and the cautious optimism for change. She understood that her actions would be scrutinized not only by her department, but by a community hungry for respect and fairness. The stage was set. Washington Heights was a neighborhood on edge, caught between its turbulent history and the possibility of transformation. And as the day unfolded, when Officer James Carter would cross paths with Chief Lisa Freeman, the simmering tensions would boil over, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about power, race, and justice in America. Lisa Freeman had been walking briskly down the polished marble hallway of the courthouse, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. The air was thick with tension, not just from the day's proceedings, but from years of unresolved issues simmering beneath the surface of the community she served. She had a purpose, a mission to bring change to a place long burdened by mistrust and division. As she neared the entrance to the courtroom, a sudden figure stepped into her path. Officer James Carter, a man known within the department for his intimidating demeanor and a record marred by complaints of racial bias, blocked her way without hesitation. "Hold it right there," Carter commanded, his voice sharp and laced with authority that felt more like accusation. Lisa paused, her gaze steady and composed. She knew the man standing before her. She had heard whispers reports from within the precinct about his behavior. Yet now it was personal. Here in a place meant for justice, Carter was asserting power in a way that felt archaic and unjust. "Officer Carter, Lisa," said her voice calm but firm. "Is there a reason you're stopping me?" Carter's eyes narrowed. "I need to see some ID. We don't take kindly to unauthorized people wandering these halls." Lisa's calm did not falter. "I'm the new police chief. This is my workplace. I assure you I am authorized." There was a flicker of disbelief in Carter's expression, as if the reality before him contradicted everything he expected. His tone shifted, more condescending than professional. "We don't get many chiefs like you around here." Better prove it. With a slow, deliberate motion, Lisa reached into her purse and pulled out her badge and credentials. She handed them to Carter, who glanced at them, but seemed reluctant to fully accept the truth. "You don't need to be so difficult," Lisa continued, maintaining her composure. "I'm here to ensure that this department operates with integrity. We're all accountable, regardless of rank." Carter scoffed, taking a step closer, his presence looming. "Integrity. That's a luxury around here, not a rule." Lisa met his gaze unwaveringly. It must be then that it's time for that luxury to become the rule. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Other courthouse staff paused their tasks, sensing the weight of the confrontation unfolding in the usually sterile corridor. Lisa's words hung in the air, a quiet declaration that would soon ripple far beyond these walls. This was not just about a badge or a hallway confrontation. It was a microcosm of a larger battle, one between old guard and new leadership, between oppressive traditions and the hope for reform. Lisa knew the stakes. Every step she took here was a step toward reshaping the culture of a police department resistant to change. She understood the resistance would be fierce, embodied by men like Carter, who clung to outdated notions of authority and control. Yet in this moment, her calm courage spoke volumes. She was not just a leader in title, but a symbol of resilience and change. The incident would echo through the community, inspiring some and provoking others. But for Lisa, it was clear the road ahead would be challenging, but surrender was never an option. As Carter stepped aside reluctantly, the room seemed to release its held breath. Lisa continued on every step, infused with determination, ready to confront the deep-rooted issues that lay ahead, one challenge at a time. The tension in the courthouse hallway thickened as Officer James Carter's demeanor shifted abruptly from suspicion to hostility. His eyes flashed with a cold intensity, and his voice took on a harsher tone, tinged with threat rather than protocol. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me what to do? Don't you?" Carter sneered, stepping closer, his posture aggressive. "I'm the one who's supposed to be in charge of security here. You're just a newcomer trying to play the boss." Lisa Freeman stood her ground, her heart pounding, but her expression unwavering. The years of navigating prejudice, skepticism, and outright hostility had tempered her resolve. Yet in this moment, the raw weight of Carter's aggression hit her beyond professional insult. It was a personal attack on her identity and authority. "I'm not here to play boss," Lisa replied steadily. "I'm here to lead with respect and fairness. That means holding everyone accountable, including those who misuse their power." Carter's face twisted in contempt. "Accountability. You have no idea what this job really takes. You want respect? Earn it." Before Lisa could respond, Carter's hand shot out, grabbing her arm roughly. The sudden physicality shocked everyone nearby. Gasps echoed as bystanders froze in place, watching a moment that should never have happened. Lisa's breath caught a flash of pain shooting through her arm, yet she refused to show weakness. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled her arm free, eyes locking with Carter's in a fierce gaze. "Physical force won't get you anywhere with me," she said quietly, but firmly, her voice steady, despite the sting. Carter's grip tightened for a moment longer, as if struggling to assert dominance, but then he released her, stepping back with a bitter glare. "You think you're special, don't you? Just wait. This isn't over." Lisa watched him retreat, her pulse still racing. The emotional roller coaster was intense, She felt the shock of violation, the sting of humiliation, but also the rising tide of inner strength. She had trained for moments like this, but living them was another matter entirely. A courthouse security officer finally intervened, stepping between them and guiding Carter away. Whispers started to spread through the hallway, the incident already stirring waves of concern and anger. Lisa took a deep breath, centering herself. She knew that this escalation was more than just an isolated incident. It was a stark reminder of the challenges she faced: systemic resistance, latent racism, and entrenched abuse of power. But it was also a moment that defined her leadership. Rather than breaking under pressure, Lisa chose to stand firm. She understood that patience and perseverance were her greatest weapons in this uphill battle. Later, reflecting on the confrontation, Lisa shared with her close colleagues, "It was painful, yes, but I won't let fear or anger dictate my actions. This is about showing strength through calm, about leading by example, even when it feels like the world is trying to knock you down." Her experience became a powerful lesson in resilience. She demonstrated how true leadership isn't about overpowering others through aggression, but about holding steady, maintaining dignity, and fighting injustice with unwavering resolve. As news of the incident spread through the department and the community, it sparked conversations that many had long avoided. The courage Lisa displayed encouraged others both within and outside the force to speak out against abuse and demand real change. This painful moment marked a turning point. It unveiled the harsh realities that persisted behind the badge, but also illuminated the potential for transformation when those in power refused to back down. Lisa's story became a beacon for many facing similar struggles, proving that even in the face of intimidation and hostility, strength and compassion could prevail. Her calm in the storm taught a vital truth: justice isn't won through violence or fear, but through courage, patience, and the unyielding pursuit of equality. The incident was a catalyst not just for Lisa, but for the entire community to confront the deep-seated issues of abuse and discrimination that too often went unchallenged. As the days unfolded, Lisa continued her work with renewed determination, ready to confront every obstacle head-on, knowing that change demanded both steadfast heart and unwavering spirit. This chapter in her journey reminded everyone listening that true power lies not in the force one wields, but in the grace and courage with which one stands for what is right. The moment James Carter released his grip on Lisa Freeman, the tension in the courthouse hallway remained thick and palpable. But amidst the charged atmosphere, something remarkable happened. A handful of bystanders, who had witnessed the confrontation, instinctively reached into their pockets and pulled out their phones. In an age dominated by technology, where every citizen carries a powerful tool in their hands, these witnesses understood the significance of their actions. They weren't just bystanders anymore. They became guardians of truth and justice. Phones were raised, cameras activated, and the raw, unfiltered reality of what had just transpired was captured in high definition. The crowd that had been whispering moments before suddenly grew silent. Their attention now focused on the unfolding scene, one that no longer belonged only to Lisa and Carter, but to anyone who would watch the recordings. The first video showed Carter's aggressive approach, his harsh words slicing through the calm atmosphere. The second caught the moment his hand grabbed Lisa's arm, an act that sparked gasps and mutters of disbelief. Lisa's composed yet resolute stance was clear for all to see her dignity intact, even in the face of blatant abuse. As these videos began circulating on social media platforms, the incident quickly became a viral sensation. People all over the city, and soon across the country, watched the clip with growing disbelief and outrage. Online discussions erupted on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, hashtagged calls for accountability, poured in demanding justice, not only for Lisa, but for all those who had suffered from systemic abuse within the police force. The power of these recordings was undeniable. They became a digital mirror held up to a system often accused of hiding behind blue walls and silence. No longer could the actions of one officer be swept under the rug or dismissed as an isolated incident. The public had evidence, clear but undeniable proof, that could no longer be ignored. Community leaders, civil rights organizations, and activists seized the opportunity. They organized forums and rallies calling for transparency, reform, and respect for human dignity. The video gave a voice to countless others who had experienced similar injustices but had no platform to be heard. Inside the police department, the circulation of the videos stirred discomfort. Some officers shifted nervously, while others remained silent, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truths laid bare by the viral footage. The department's leadership found themselves under intense scrutiny, pressured to respond not only to the public, but to the growing unrest within their own ranks. Lisa, meanwhile, was thrust into the spotlight not by choice, but by circumstance. She felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She knew her experience was not unique, but the attention she received could be a catalyst for change. In quiet moments, she reflected on the significance of technology in this fight for justice. Without those videos, she admitted to a trusted friend, this story might never have seen the light of day. It's the power of witnesses, the courage of everyday people who refused to look away. Her words underscored a new reality. Justice in the modern age depended not only on the law, but on the eyes and voices of the community. The bystander's decision to record was more than documentation. It was an act of defiance against oppression, a beacon of hope that truth could prevail even in the darkest of circumstances. This moment, the intersection of technology, activism, and courage, revealed a shift in the balance of power. The narrative was no longer controlled solely by institutions. It was increasingly shaped by those willing to expose injustice regardless of the risks. Yet while the videos sparked outrage and solidarity, they also opened a new front in the battle for justice. There were those who sought to discredit the recordings, to challenge the authenticity, or to paint Lisa as the antagonist. Social media, as powerful as it was, became a battleground for competing narratives. Lisa understood that the fight was far from over. The viral videos had broken the silence, but now came the harder work, ensuring the incident led to meaningful change, accountability for Carter, and protection for others who might face similar abuse. She engaged with community groups, law enforcement reform advocates, and legal experts determined to harness the momentum. Together, they crafted strategies to push for policy revisions, mandatory body cameras, and better training focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. The witnesses who recorded that day found themselves part of a larger movement. Their videos had turned them into unexpected activists, their simple acts of holding a camera now tools for systemic change. As the story spread, it became clear that the power to hold authority accountable was no longer confined to the courtroom or city hall. It resided in the hands of ordinary people willing to stand up record and speak out. The incident at the courthouse became a symbol, a stark reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked, and a call to action for communities everywhere. It demonstrated how collective vigilance could disrupt cycles of abuse and demand a more just, transparent system. Lisa's confrontation, once a private ordeal, had transformed into a public reckoning. The videos ensured that the truth was not just heard, but felt resonating deeply across divides and inspiring countless others to confront injustice in their own lives. The digital age had given birth to a new kind of justice warrior. Everyday citizens with smartphones ready to capture the truth and amplify voices that had long been silenced. This power came with responsibility, a call to use technology wisely, to protect the vulnerable, and to never let silence be the refuge of wrongdoing. Lisa's story, and the witnesses who recorded her struggle, became a testament to the enduring strength of community, the necessity of accountability, and the transformative potential of standing together in the face of oppression. It was a vivid illustration that while one voice may tremble, many voices united can shake the very foundations of injustice. The viral explosion of the video showing Officer James Carter's aggressive confrontation with Lisa Freeman ignited a firestorm that spread far beyond the courthouse walls. Social media platforms became the battleground where truth clashed with denial and justice was demanded with a passion that could no longer be ignored. Within hours of the footage being posted, it had been shared thousands of times. Each view fueling a wave of outrage and calls for immediate accountability. The raw and unedited nature of the video pierced through the usual defenses and spin, showing a stark, undeniable reality. A white police officer abusing his power against a black woman who was not just any citizen, but the newly appointed police chief striving to reform the very system Carter represented. Twitter hashtags like #JusticeForFreeman and #HoldCopsAccountable trended nationwide, rallying voices from all walks of life. Influencers, activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens joined the conversation, creating a digital chorus that echoed the long-standing frustration and pain of communities burdened by systemic racism. This public uproar forced local authorities and the police department into a reactive stance. Statements were issued, investigations were promised, and Carter was suspended pending inquiry actions that, while necessary, felt like overdue responses to a problem that had been festering for years. Comparisons to other high-profile cases of police brutality and racial injustice soon flooded social media and news outlets. The murder of George Floyd, the shooting of Breonna Taylor, and countless other tragedies were recalled not just as historical footnotes, but as living reminders of a systemic issue that had yet to be fully addressed. The parallels were clear. Each incident, though unique in its details, shared the common threads of abuse of authority, racial bias, and a culture of silence that protected perpetrators instead of victims. These moments collectively painted a sobering picture of a justice system strained by inequality, demanding transformation, not just in policy, but in hearts and minds. Journalists began dissecting the video with experts and community leaders, analyzing the implications of the incident in light of broader societal issues. Police reform advocates highlighted how body cameras and citizen recordings have become crucial in exposing misconduct and holding law enforcement accountable, tools that had been unavailable or ignored in previous decades. Meanwhile, on the ground, protests were organized, echoing the digital call for change. Crowds gathered outside City Hall and police precincts, carrying signs that read, "End police brutality," and "Justice," for all their voices a thunderous reminder that behind every viral video lies a community demanding dignity and respect. Yet the power of social media was double-edged. Alongside support and calls for justice, misinformation and deflection also surfaced. Some sought to undermine Lisa Freeman's credibility, spreading false narratives that attempted to distract from Carter's actions. This digital battleground revealed the complexities of fighting for truth in a polarized environment. But even amidst these challenges, the video's impact was undeniable. It accelerated conversations around police training, community oversight, and the urgent need for cultural change within law enforcement agencies. The incident became a catalyst for discussions at city council meetings, prompting officials to reevaluate policies and invest in programs aimed at reducing racial bias. Social media's role in this movement was a testament to the evolving nature of activism in the 21st century. The democratization of information meant that anyone with a smartphone could document injustices, and these first-hand accounts could no longer be silenced or ignored. It shifted some of the power away from traditional gatekeepers, empowering communities to tell their stories and demand accountability. For Lisa Freeman, the viral attention was a double-edged sword. While it amplified her voice and brought critical attention to systemic problems, it also meant living under a microscope with every aspect of her life and career scrutinized. Yet she remained steadfast, understanding that her experience was a beacon for change, inspiring others to speak out and stand up against abuse. The viral outcry also sparked a deeper reflection within law enforcement. Some officers saw the incident as a wake-up call, pushing for internal reforms and cultural shifts that could prevent such abuses in the future. Others resisted, fearful of losing privileges or exposing uncomfortable truths. This tension underscored the challenges ahead in dismantling ingrained systems of bias. Throughout this period, social media served not only as a platform for outrage, but also as a forum for education and healing. Videos, articles, and live discussions helped communities understand the roots of systemic racism and explore ways to foster empathy and reform. In the end, the viral video of Lisa Freeman and James Carter was more than just footage. It was a spark that ignited a nationwide dialogue about justice, equity, and the power of collective action. It reminded us all that while social media can expose the darkest corners of society, it can also illuminate the path toward a more just and compassionate future. This digital revolution in activism showed that change is no longer confined to courtrooms and government halls. It now resides in the hands of every person willing to witness record and demand justice, proving that even a single video shared by ordinary citizens can shake the foundations of a system long resistant to change. Systemic racism in policing is not always loud or overt. Often it hides beneath layers of institutional culture, unspoken rules, and unconscious biases that shape how officers see the communities they serve and those they view with suspicion. This hidden enemy operates quietly, but with devastating effects, undermining trust, perpetuating inequality, and shielding misconduct from accountability. Lisa Freeman's experience with Officer James Carter was not an isolated incident born from personal prejudice alone. It was a symptom of a deeper, more entrenched problem. The culture within many police departments has long tolerated and sometimes even encouraged a code of silence, what is often called the blue wall. Officers who witness misconduct may hesitate to report it, fearing backlash, ostracization, or damage to their careers. This silence creates an environment where abuse can flourish unchecked. Within such a system, unconscious biases play a powerful role. These are the automatic, unintentional associations and stereotypes that influence behavior without awareness. For many officers, these biases are shaped by long-standing societal narratives that link race with criminality. Despite training and reforms, these deep-seated perceptions affect decisions from whom to stop on the street to how forcefully to respond. In Lisa's case, Carter's instant suspicion and aggressive demands for identification were fueled not just by an isolated moment of bad judgment, but by a system that implicitly allowed him to view a black woman, especially one challenging the status quo, as a threat. His actions were emboldened by a department culture that historically protected officers accused of misconduct rather than confronting the root causes. Moreover, accountability mechanisms within police departments are often weak or inconsistent. Internal investigations can be hampered by conflicts of interest, as officers are frequently investigated by their own peers. This lack of impartiality can lead to dismissals of complaints or minimal disciplinary actions, reinforcing a sense of immunity among officers prone to misconduct. This systemic failure is compounded by the difficulty victims and witnesses face in reporting abuses. Fear of retaliation, disbelief from authorities, or community mistrust in law enforcement can silence voices before they are heard. The cycle continues, abuse remains hidden. Victims remain unheard, and the system perpetuates itself. Examining the case of James Carter alongside national incidents reveals common threads. The officers involved in high-profile cases of brutality or discrimination often had histories of complaints and questionable behavior that were overlooked or inadequately addressed. These oversights are not just administrative failures. They signify a fundamental flaw in policing culture. The hidden nature of this enemy means that reforms must go beyond surface-level changes. Implicit bias training is a start, but without real accountability, transparency, and cultural shifts, the same patterns will persist. Departments must foster environments where ethical behavior is rewarded and misconduct is unequivocally condemned. Leadership plays a crucial role in this transformation. When figures like Lisa Freeman rise through the ranks, they bring with them the perspective and courage needed to challenge these entrenched norms. Yet as her confrontation with Carter illustrates, change is neither easy nor welcomed by all. Resistance from within can be fierce, requiring persistent allies and public support. It's also vital to empower communities. Building trust between police and the public requires open dialogue, community oversight, and partnerships that prioritize safety and respect over suspicion and control. When communities feel heard and valued, the likelihood of cooperation and positive outcomes increases. This systemic issue also demands legal and policy reforms. Independent civilian review boards, clear use of force standards, and mandatory reporting of misconduct are essential tools. Data collection on police interactions by race and ethnicity can illuminate disparities and guide targeted interventions. Reflecting on the hidden enemy in policing, one understands why incidents like Lisa's confrontation with Carter resonate so deeply. They are not just moments of injustice, they are windows into a system that requires profound change. Acknowledging the invisible forces of systemic racism is uncomfortable, but necessary. Only by confronting these challenges honestly can society hope to build a police force that truly serves all its people with fairness and dignity. The story of Lisa Freeman is more than a personal battle. It's a call to recognize and dismantle the unseen barriers within policing. It reminds us that power unchecked becomes dangerous, and that vigilance, courage, and unity are essential to reclaim justice for everyone. Lisa Freeman's journey to becoming the new police chief was not a straightforward path paved with ease. Her story begins long before she stepped into the halls of the police department. It traces back to a battlefield far from Washington Heights, where the stakes were life and death, and the challenges tested every fiber of her being. Born into a modest family in a small town, Lisa grew up witnessing the stark realities of prejudice and limitation. As a Black woman, she was often reminded subtly and overtly of the barriers placed in front of her simply because of her race and gender. But rather than allowing these challenges to define her, Lisa chose to rise above them, fueled by a fierce determination to break the mold and carve her own path. Her enlistment in the military was a pivotal moment, a choice born from a desire to serve her country and prove her strength in an environment where discipline, resilience, and courage were non-negotiable. The military, however, was not a sanctuary from bias. It was a battleground in its own right. Lisa quickly realized that she would have to fight not only external enemies, but also internal prejudices. Gender and racial biases were deeply embedded in the ranks, and as a Black woman, Lisa found herself navigating a complex web of expectations and stereotypes. In boot camp, she faced rigorous physical and mental training designed to push recruits beyond their limits. Lisa excelled, her dedication evident in every drill, every early morning run, and every demanding exercise. Yet despite her undeniable competence, she encountered skepticism from some superiors who doubted her abilities purely because she didn't fit the traditional image of a soldier. One day during a particularly grueling training exercise, a sergeant pulled Lisa aside. "You've got the skill," he said, "but out here, you'll have to be twice as tough. Not just in body, but in mind. They'll test you sometimes unfairly. You have to stand tall." Those words stuck with her. She learned to anticipate challenges not as obstacles, but as tests of her resilience. Over the years, Lisa was deployed overseas, where the realities of war exposed her to a different kind of hardship. The loss of comrades, the chaos of combat, and the constant pressure to make split-second decisions that could mean life or death. In those moments, she discovered an inner strength that no prejudice could shake. Back on home soil, the military experience had equipped Lisa with more than just physical endurance. It had sharpened her leadership skills, instilled discipline, and most importantly, fortified her spirit against adversity. Yet the struggles didn't end when she left the military and joined the police force. The police department was a different arena, but carried many of the same undercurrents of systemic bias. Lisa faced the challenge of navigating a culture historically dominated by men, often resistant to change, and resistant to voices like hers. Voices calling for reform and equality. At department meetings, her ideas for community-focused policing and anti-bias training were sometimes met with silence. Other times, with thinly veiled hostility. Why shake things up? Some questioned. This is how it's always been done. But Lisa's military background had taught her that leadership wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about doing what was right, even when it was difficult. One afternoon during a routine briefing, Lieutenant Harris, a seasoned officer known for his traditional views, cornered Lisa in the hallway. "You think you're here to fix everything?" "It's not that simple. Some things don't change," he warned. Lisa met his gaze steadily. "Maybe change is exactly what we need," she replied softly, but firmly. That moment symbolized the constant tension Lisa faced between the desire to transform the department and the inertia of established customs. Her military experience had prepared her for this. The resilience built in combat zones translated into patience and persistence within the police force. Every challenge she encountered only strengthened her resolve. When Lisa was finally appointed as the police chief, it was not just a personal achievement, it was a beacon of hope for many in the community. A black woman rising to lead a department long criticized for its handling of racial issues sent a powerful message. Yet with this new role came even greater scrutiny and resistance, as the incident with Officer James Carter would soon reveal. Carter's immediate suspicion and disrespect towards Chief Freeman underscored the very biases and abuses she was determined to eradicate. Throughout her military career, Lisa had learned that battles are rarely won by force alone. They require strategy, empathy, and unwavering dedication. Her fight now was not on foreign soil, but within the very system meant to protect and serve the community, a system that needed to reflect the values of justice, equality, and respect. Lisa's journey from the battlefield to the police chief's office serves as a powerful testament to the strength forged in adversity. It illustrates how the courage to confront injustice, combined with the resilience honed through struggle, can challenge even the most deeply rooted systems. Her story reminds us all that change is possible, but only if we have the will to stand firm against the forces that resist it. The day that Lisa Freeman faced Officer James Carter in the courthouse hallway would be forever etched in her memory and in the memory of everyone who witnessed that moment. It was a moment that encapsulated the very essence of her fight against injustice, prejudice, and abuse of power. The courthouse was buzzing with the usual mix of tension and anticipation. Lisa had come to attend a hearing, a routine affair by most accounts, but she could feel the weight of expectations pressing on her shoulders. As the new police chief, every step she took was under scrutiny, both by supporters who believed in her vision for change and by detractors resistant to it. As she walked down the long, narrow hallway, Lisa's calm demeanor was suddenly shattered by the imposing figure of James Carter. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto her with unmistakable suspicion and disdain. Without warning, he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Chief Freeman Carter's voice was low, but laced with a threatening edge. "You know the rules. Identification. Papers." Lisa's gaze remained steady. She took a measured breath, her mind recalling every lesson from years of facing adversity in the military, in the police force, and in the daily battles against bias. "Officer Carter," she replied evenly, "I am the chief of this department. I carry my identification at all times. If you need confirmation, I will gladly show it. But there is no need for hostility." Carter's lips curled into a sneer. "I'm just doing my job. We all have to follow the rules, even you." The air between them thickened with tension. Lisa's heartbeat quickened, but her voice did not waver. Respect is a rule too, and it's one you seem to forget. Carter scoffed, his fingers twitching near his belt. The years of unchecked power had fostered in him a sense of entitlement, an arrogance that fed off the silence of those who might call him out. Lisa's eyes softened for a brief moment, a silent plea for reason to prevail. I am here to serve and protect everyone, including you. Let's remember that, before actions cross the line. The officers nearby, sensing the escalating hostility, began to gather their faces, a mixture of curiosity and concern. Some whispered among themselves, unsure of what to expect. The scene was unfolding like a slow-motion drama, the courthouse hallway transformed into a stage where justice was being tested in real time. Carter's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. You think you're untouchable because you wear the badge. Don't forget this place has rules, and you're not above them. Lisa met his challenge without flinching. I am not above the law, but I will not tolerate abuse of power, and I will always stand up for what is right. Their exchange was more than just words. It was a collision of two very different worlds, one rooted in fear and prejudice, the other in hope and resilience. Lisa's unwavering composure was a testament to the inner strength she had cultivated through years of hardship. She knew that giving in to anger or fear would only fuel the cycle of injustice. Instead, she chose to hold on to her dignity and the belief that change begins with courage. As the confrontation lingered, a witness stepped forward, a young court clerk, who had been watching from a distance. She quietly pulled out her phone, ready to capture the moment. Lisa noticed, but gave a subtle nod, recognizing the power of this silent ally. The tension finally began to diffuse when a senior officer approached, placing a firm hand on Carter's shoulder. Enough, he said calmly. Let's remember who we serve. Carter hesitated, but then stepped aside, his posture still rigid, but less confrontational. Lisa took a deep breath and continued on her way. Her steps steady and purposeful. Behind her, murmurs of admiration and support rippled through the gathering crowd. That brief but intense confrontation became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that standing firm against injustice requires not only strength, but also grace. Lisa's ability to maintain her composure, assert her rights, and diffuse a volatile situation spoke volumes about the leader she was and the change she sought to bring. In the days that followed, the story of Lisa and Carter's encounter spread through the community. It sparked conversations about respect, accountability, and the urgent need to address systemic problems within the police force. Lisa herself reflected on that moment as a defining point in her journey. It reinforced her conviction that true leadership is tested in times of conflict, and that the courage to face adversity head-on is what separates those who merely hold power from those who wield it responsibly. For Lisa Freeman, the confrontation was not an end. It was a beginning, a call to action for herself and for all who believed in justice to continue the fight against discrimination and abuse with unwavering resolve and an unbreakable spirit. The moment the confrontation between Lisa Freeman and Officer James Carter unfolded in the courthouse hallway, the ripples of shock spread far beyond those present in that tense space. It was as if a sudden jolt had shaken the very fabric of the Washington Heights community, a community long burdened by silent tensions and unspoken grievances. As news of the incident quickly traveled through whispers and social media posts, the initial reaction was one of disbelief. Many couldn't fathom that such blatant disrespect and abuse of power could occur so brazenly, especially against Lisa, a woman who not only represented law enforcement, but also embodied hope for change. Her calm strength in the face of aggression only heightened the community's sense of outrage and empathy. Within Lisa's family, the shock was immediate and visceral. Her husband Marcus sat silently in their modest living room, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. Their children, unaware of the complexities, but sensitive to the tension in the air, clung to their mother, who carried the heavy weight of responsibility not just as a chief, but as a wife and mother. The family's unity and resilience became a source of inspiration to those who watched from afar. Meanwhile, in the local community, centers, churches, and cafes, conversations ignited like sparks in dry grass. Residents gathered in small groups, sharing their own stories of encounters with authority, moments of fear, humiliation, and frustration. The incident involving Lisa was no longer isolated. It symbolized a collective experience of systemic injustice that had too long been ignored. Social media became a powerful tool in this awakening. Videos and first-hand accounts were posted, rapidly amplifying the incident beyond Washington Heights to cities and towns across the country. Hashtags dedicated to the event trended within hours, sparking nationwide discussions on police accountability, racial bias, and the urgent need for reform. Journalists flocked to interview witnesses and community leaders, each story painting a vivid picture of a community ready to rise. Local activists organized meetings, calling for peaceful protests and forums where voices long silenced could be heard. They stressed the importance of channeling shock and anger into constructive action, not just for Lisa, but for all those affected by similar injustices. In one of the community forums, Reverend Thomas, a respected local leader, addressed a packed room. His voice carried the weight of years of advocating for justice. "This moment," he said, "is a wake-up call. It reminds us that the fight for dignity and equality is far from over. But it also shows us that change is possible when we stand together." The role of traditional and social media in this transformation was undeniable. Television news reports, radio discussions, and newspaper editorials kept the incident in the spotlight, demanding accountability. Social media platforms allowed ordinary people to become storytellers and organizers, weaving a narrative of resistance and hope that transcended geographic and social boundaries. Yet this surge of mobilization also revealed the complexities and challenges inherent in such movements. Not everyone agreed on the path forward. Some voices cautioned against hasty judgments, urging patience for legal processes. Others expressed fear that protests might escalate into violence, threatening community safety. Lisa herself remained a steady presence amid the whirlwind. In interviews, she emphasized the power of unity and peaceful advocacy. "This isn't about one person," she said. "It's about every individual who has faced injustice and every community seeking to heal and transform. We must listen, learn, and work together." Her leadership extended beyond words. She began meeting with community organizers, legal experts, and police reform advocates to develop comprehensive strategies aimed at addressing systemic issues. These efforts underscored the idea that real change requires collaboration across all sectors of society. As the community moved from shock to mobilization, a broader conversation about race authority and justice took root. The incident with Officer Carter became a catalyst, a painful yet necessary moment that forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. In schools, educators incorporated discussions on racial bias and civil rights into their curriculum. In city halls, policymakers debated reforms in police training and oversight. Grassroots organizations gained renewed energy, expanding their outreach and advocacy. Throughout it all, the voices of ordinary people were the loudest and most persistent. From the grandmother who had lived through segregation to the young activists using hashtags to spread awareness, each contribution added depth and urgency to the movement. This collective response demonstrated the profound power of communities to transform pain into progress. It illustrated that while shock can stun, it is action fueled by solidarity and resilience that truly drives change. In reflecting on this turning point, it becomes clear that Lisa Freeman's experience was more than an isolated incident. It was a mirror held up to society, revealing both its flaws and its potential for growth. And so, as Washington Heights and countless others took their first steps toward justice, one thing was certain: the fight was far from over, but the resolve to see it through burned brighter than ever. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of the police department's internal affairs office, casting long shadows over the tired faces gathered inside. This was the nerve center, where truth and loyalty often clashed, a battleground, known to few, but critical to the integrity of any law enforcement agency. The case involving Officer James Carter and Chief Lisa Freeman had landed squarely in this tense arena. Detective Maria Torres, a seasoned internal affairs investigator with a reputation for unflinching honesty, sat at the head of the table. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the pile of reports, witness statements, and digital evidence spread before her. "This case isn't just about misconduct," she said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. "It's about the culture that allowed it to happen, and that's what we need to expose." The room nodded, but the weight of their task was palpable. Internal affairs, often referred to as the thin blue line, walked a delicate path between upholding justice and maintaining solidarity within the force. It was a line so thin that stepping over it could mean isolation, hostility, or worse. Torres knew the stakes were high. Officer Carter was not just any cop. He was a veteran with years on the force and a history marked by several complaints about racial insensitivity, none of which had ever led to significant disciplinary action. Many within the department had turned a blind eye, unwilling to challenge a colleague, especially one perceived as effective on the streets. "Look at this." Torres pointed to a report detailing previous complaints. Every case dismissed or minimized. Patterns ignored. It's not just Carter acting alone, it's a system protecting its own. One junior investigator shifted uncomfortably. But how do we break through that wall of silence? The blue wall. It's strong here. Officers close ranks. Whistleblowers get pushed out or labeled as troublemakers. Maria's voice hardened. That's exactly why we must be meticulous. Every piece of evidence must be airtight. We owe it to Lisa, to the community, and to the officers, who do their jobs honorably. Across town, Lisa Freeman was preparing for a series of meetings about police reform and community outreach. Her calm demeanor masked the storm raging behind the scenes. She understood too well the resistance simmering within the department, the quiet opposition from those who resented her presence, who saw her as an outsider disrupting the status quo. Back in internal affairs, tensions rose as they began interviewing officers involved in the incident and those who had witnessed Carter's past behaviors. Some were defensive, others reluctant, and a few surprisingly candid. Sergeant Daniels, a longtime colleague of Carter, reluctantly admitted, "Look, Carter's rough around the edges, but everyone has his back. We see him as a protector, even if his methods are unorthodox." Torres pressed on unorthodox methods can cross lines, Sergeant, and when they do, they damage trust, especially with communities who already feel targeted. Daniels sighed. "It's complicated. There's pressure from above to keep the streets safe, and sometimes that means making tough calls." The interview exposed a critical dilemma. Balancing law enforcement effectiveness with civil rights was not just a policy challenge, it was a cultural fault line within the department. Meanwhile, the investigation faced another hurdle. Officers reluctant to testify against Carter, fearing backlash or ostracization. "It's a silent war," Torres later confided to a trusted colleague. "We have to protect witnesses and ensure their safety. Otherwise, the truth dies in these walls." Public scrutiny intensified as the news of the investigation leaked. Community leaders demanded transparency and accountability. Local activist Maya Johnson spoke passionately at a town hall. Internal affairs must not become a shield for bad actors. This is about justice for Lisa Freeman, for our neighborhoods, and for everyone who believes in fairness. The pressure was immense. For Lisa, it was both a validation and a reminder of the uphill battle ahead. She had entered this role to change the culture, but changing a culture meant confronting deeply entrenched loyalties and fears. Inside the department, whispers grew into open debates. Some officers began questioning their own roles in perpetuating silence. Detective Torres noticed subtle shifts. A few officers volunteered information previously withheld, and a growing sense of cautious hope emerged. Yet the thin blue line still held strong in many quarters. The investigation team faced subtle sabotage, missing reports, delayed interviews, and bureaucratic stonewalling. "Every step forward feels like 2 steps back," Torres admitted in a confidential briefing. "But we can't give up." The paradox was clear. Internal affairs was both the department's greatest hope for reform and its most vulnerable institution. Its success or failure in this case would send a message about the department's willingness to confront its own flaws. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation unearthed troubling truths. Not only had Carter's behavior been tolerated, but it had also been implicitly encouraged by a leadership more focused on image than accountability. Reports showed a pattern of deflecting complaints, protecting reputations, and prioritizing internal loyalty over community trust. Yet amidst this grim reality, moments of courage shone through. Officers who had been silent began speaking up. A veteran patrolman shared, "I used to think standing by was loyalty. Now I see it's complicity." Lisa Freeman, informed of these developments, felt a renewed sense of purpose. She addressed the department, her voice steady and resolute. "We cannot build a safer community without first building a department that holds itself accountable. Integrity is non-negotiable." The investigation climaxed with a formal hearing that laid bare the department's systemic issues. Officer Carter faced charges not just for his conduct toward Lisa, but for a history of abuses enabled by a culture resistant to change. The fallout was profound. The department initiated sweeping reforms, including mandatory bias training, independent oversight committees, and stronger protections for whistleblowers. In the community, the investigation reinforced the call for broader justice. Residents, activists, and leaders united, recognizing that transparency was the first step toward healing. Detective Maria Torres reflected on the ordeal. This case tested our commitment to truth. It showed how fragile justice can be when loyalty blinds us. But it also proved that courage and perseverance can crack even the toughest walls. For Lisa Freeman, the internal affairs probe was a battle within a battle, one that tested her leadership and resilience. But it also reaffirmed her belief that meaningful change, though difficult, was possible. The thin blue line, once a symbol of division, had been stretched and strained. But in this trial by fire, it revealed cracks through which hope for reform could emerge. And so, the story of Lisa Freeman and James Carter's confrontation became more than an incident. It became a catalyst for transformation, a beacon illuminating the complex struggle for justice within the very institutions meant to protect it. In the midst of the turmoil rippling through the police department, a quieter but equally powerful movement was taking shape. Inside the precincts and behind closed doors, a group of officers, many of them people of color, and a few courageous white allies, were quietly fighting back against the culture of racism and silence. These officers, often overlooked in the headlines, were the unsung heroes of change. The allies within the system who understood that true reform would never come from the outside alone. One such officer was Sergeant Angela Martinez, a Latina with over 15 years of service. Her voice had always been calm, but firm. Her reputation built on a blend of professionalism and empathy. Sitting in a small conference room with her closest colleagues, Angela shared her story. "When I first joined the force," she began, "I thought that being a good cop meant following orders, blending in, and keeping my head down. But very quickly I saw the cracks, the ways people of color were treated differently, how complaints got buried, and how the culture protected those who crossed the line." She paused, her eyes reflecting years of quiet frustration. "I realized that if I wanted to change things, I couldn't just hope for the system to fix itself. I had to be part of the change." Beside her sat Officer Malik Thompson, an African-American patrolman whose experiences had shaped his resolve. "It's not just about policies," Malik explained. "It's about culture. The unspoken rules that say you don't question your fellow officers, especially when it comes to issues like race. Breaking that silence. It's dangerous." Malik recalled instances when he witnessed misconduct, but hesitated to speak up. "I feared retaliation. Being labeled a troublemaker can end careers. But when the incident with Chief Freeman happened, it became clear to me that staying silent was no longer an option." Their stories were echoed by Officer Emily Collins, a white woman who had joined the department determined to fight inequality. "I was naive," she admitted. "I thought the department was beyond prejudice, but soon I saw how deeply ingrained it was. Supporting my colleagues of color pushing for accountability, it cost me friendships and trust. But I stand with them, because it's the right thing to do." Together, this group formed a fragile coalition committed to exposing injustice, advocating for victims, and pushing for transparency. Their battles were both external and internal. External, in confronting overt racism, and internal, in breaking through the blue wall of silence that insulated misconduct. In their meetings, they shared strategies for supporting whistleblowers and protecting vulnerable officers. "We have to build trust among ourselves first," Angela said one evening. "If we fracture from within, the system stays broken." They organized workshops on implicit bias and cultural sensitivity, often facing skepticism or outright resistance from more senior officers. Change is slow, Malik acknowledged. But it's happening. Their role was vital during the investigation of James Carter's actions against Chief Freeman. Several of these officers stepped forward as witnesses breaking ranks to tell the truth, despite the personal risks. Their courage brought credibility to the accusations and helped dismantle the wall of denial. Detective Maria Torres, leading the Internal Affairs probe, praised their bravery. Without their testimonies, the truth might have stayed buried. They remind us that change is possible when people refuse to be complicit. Yet the pressure was immense. These officers often faced isolation, intimidation, and threats to their careers. It's a lonely path, Emily confessed, but the alternative silence is worse. We owe it to the community and ourselves to be better. Outside the force, their efforts inspired community activists and leaders. Maya Johnson, a prominent civil rights advocate, spoke highly of their contributions. Change requires allies everywhere. These officers are proof that reform isn't just a slogan, it's a movement growing from within. The Alliance's influence extended beyond the immediate case. They pushed for institutional reforms, mandatory bias training, creation of civilian oversight boards, and establishment of safe channels for reporting misconduct without fear of reprisal. This coalition also fostered a new culture of accountability. Officers learned to challenge each other constructively, shifting from a culture of silence to one of dialogue and responsibility. We're not perfect, Angela admitted, but every step forward counts. Their work highlighted a fundamental truth that fighting racism inside the police force requires the courage of those willing to stand against their own, sometimes the hardest fight of all. As the story of Chief Freeman's confrontation with Officer Carter unfolded publicly, these allies became symbols of hope, a testament that change begins with individuals choosing integrity over complicity. In the end, their collective action became a catalyst for broader reform, bridging divides and reshaping a system long resistant to change. This is the story of those inside the thin blue line who refuse to let it become a wall of silence. It is a reminder that justice is not just a goal, but a responsibility, one carried on the shoulders of the brave, the determined, and the unwavering. Through their struggles and sacrifices, they offer a blueprint for a future where law enforcement truly serves and protects all members of the community without fear or prejudice. And as their voices grow louder, the hope for a just, equitable policing system shines brighter than ever before. The courtroom was packed with tension as Lisa Freeman, the new police chief and a symbol of change, prepared for the legal battle that lay ahead. This was more than just a case. It was a fight against a deeply entrenched system that had long protected its own at the expense of justice. Lisa's journey from a victim of abuse of power to the very face challenging it was both inspiring and daunting. Her legal team, led by the seasoned attorney Michael Reynolds, was acutely aware of the uphill battle. "This isn't just about one officer's misconduct," Michael told Lisa during a late-night strategy session. "It's about dismantling a culture that has allowed this behavior to thrive, unchecked, for decades." Lisa nodded, her resolve unwavering, despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "I didn't come here to win an easy case," she replied. "I came to make sure no one else has to suffer what I did." The opening days of the trial were a flurry of intense preparation and courtroom drama. Prosecutors meticulously laid out the timeline of events: the unwarranted, stop the verbal abuse, the intimidation all backed by damning video evidence captured by onlookers. The public had seen the footage. Now the court would hear the voices behind the visuals. Defense attorneys, however, mounted a fierce resistance. They portrayed Lisa as overreacting, questioning her authority and motives. This was a routine check, the defense lawyer argued. Chief Freeman's interpretation of events is exaggerated and fueled by personal bias. Michael Reynolds countered sharply. This wasn't a routine check. It was a blatant abuse of power rooted in racial prejudice. The evidence speaks for itself. Witness after witness took the stand. Fellow officers testified, some reluctantly, others, with newfound courage inspired by Lisa's leadership. Community members shared their experiences with police misconduct, painting a broader picture of systemic issues. One particularly emotional moment came when an older retired officer, William Carter, took the stand. His voice trembled as he recounted his own battles with the culture of silence. "I didn't speak up then out of fear and loyalty," he admitted. "But seeing what happened to Chief Freeman, I knew silence was no longer an option." The courtroom felt heavy with history. Generations of unspoken truths, abuses, and betrayals now brought to light. Lisa's presence as a black woman leading the charge added profound significance to the proceedings. She was no longer just a victim. She was a catalyst for change. Throughout the trial, Lisa maintained her composure. Her testimony was clear, honest, and powerful. She spoke not only of her experience, but of the countless others who had faced similar injustices silently. "This fight," she said, "is for every voice that was ever ignored or silenced." Behind the scenes, the legal team navigated complex challenges, procedural delays, attempts to discredit witnesses, and pressures from influential groups determined to protect the status quo. Each day brought new hurdles, but also moments of progress. Michael confided to Lisa one evening, "They're playing hardball, but every obstruction they throw up is proof of why this fight matters." Lisa responded with quiet determination. "They fear change because it threatens their power. But we're here to see justice done." The trial also illuminated broader issues within the police department and the justice system. Expert witnesses testified on institutional racism, implicit bias, and the psychological toll of systemic discrimination on officers and civilians alike. One expert explained, abuse of power isn't just about individual bad actors. It's woven into the fabric of institutions that have long resisted accountability. This perspective helped frame Lisa's case as part of a larger movement demanding reform, not just punishment. Public interest surged as media coverage intensified. Community leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens followed every development closely. Protests outside the courthouse called for fairness and systemic change, amplifying Lisa's fight beyond the courtroom walls. Lisa's family stood steadfast beside her. Her husband, Marcus, a retired military officer, was her pillar of strength. "You're not just fighting for yourself," he told her one night. "You're fighting for all of us." His words reminded Lisa why she endured the grueling days and sleepless nights. It was a fight for justice, dignity, and the promise of a better future. As the trial progressed, it became clear this was a turning point. The defense's tactics grew desperate, the prosecution's resolve stronger. Lisa's courage inspired even the most skeptical observers. One afternoon, as the judge called for a recess, Lisa met with her legal team. Michael smiled. "We're making history here." Lisa replied, "History will remember who stood up and who stayed silent. The courtroom drama continued with unexpected twists and moments of profound humanity. Each testimony added layers to the narrative, exposing the raw realities behind headlines and sound bites. This legal battle was not just about holding one man accountable. It was a challenge to an entire system, entrenched in inequality. Lisa Freeman's fight for justice symbolized a larger demand for truth, transparency, and a transformation. As the trial unfolded, the nation watched. Hope mingled with tension, and the stakes could not have been higher. For Lisa, this was more than a trial. It was a testament to resilience, a beacon for change, and a call to action for all who believed in justice. In the end, whatever the verdict, Lisa Freeman's battle had already left an indelible mark. It forced a reckoning, gave voice to the voiceless, and rekindled the fight against injustice within the very system meant to protect the people. This is a story of courage against oppression, of standing tall when the world tries to push you down. And it is far from over. The streets of Washington Heights soon became alive with a wave of peaceful protests, an outpouring of collective determination and hope. Across the city, people of all backgrounds gathered, united by a shared conviction: justice for Lisa Freeman and an end to systemic injustice. It wasn't just about one woman or one incident anymore. It was a movement ignited by a story that resonated deeply with so many. The marchers carried signs emblazoned with messages of hope and resilience. Justice for all, end police racism, respect and accountability. The chants echoed through the streets, a powerful rhythm that reverberated in the hearts of those who marched. Among them were community leaders, activists, clergy, students, and families, ordinary citizens driven by an extraordinary commitment to change. One organizer, Maria Thompson, a longtime civil rights advocate, stood at the forefront. "This is what democracy looks like," she told the crowd during a rally. "It's not just about anger. It's about action, unity, and demanding a future where everyone is treated with dignity." The movement's strength lay in its diversity. People from various walks of life came together, bridging divides, proving that change was not only necessary, but possible. The protests remained peaceful, grounded in respect and resolve, refusing to let anger turn to violence. Local churches opened their doors to protesters, offering water and shelter. Small businesses handed out food. It was a community mobilized by compassion and a fierce commitment to justice. Social media played a critical role in amplifying the movement's voice. Videos and live streams spread rapidly, bringing global attention to the protests and Lisa's story. Hashtags like #JusticeForFreeman and #StandWithLisa trended nationwide, sparking conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces. Journalists and media outlets began to cover the story with renewed focus not just on the incident, but on the broader issues of systemic racism and abuse of power within law enforcement. Editorials called for policy changes, transparency, and reform. Inside the courthouse, the protests added weight to the courtroom drama. Judges, lawyers, and officers were acutely aware that the eyes of the nation were watching. Public pressure became a tangible force, compelling accountability in ways that mere legal arguments could not. Yet amidst the hope and progress, there were challenges. Some officials and factions within the police resisted calls for change. Attempts to delegitimize the protests surfaced, painting the movement as disruptive rather than necessary. But the protesters remained steadfast. Lisa's words during an interview captured the spirit of the moment. "We're not here to break things. We're here to build something better for our children, for our community, for our country. This phase of the story revealed the undeniable power of collective action. The movement underscored that change doesn't come solely from courtrooms or political offices. It rises from the streets, from voices joined in unison, demanding justice and equality. The protests also inspired similar demonstrations in cities across the country. Solidarity marches, town hall meetings, and educational forums spread the message. People learned, listened, and began to see the pervasive nature of systemic issues that many had long ignored. In this swelling tide of activism, new leaders emerged. Youth activists brought fresh energy and innovative ideas, connecting struggles for racial justice to broader social and economic issues. Veteran civil rights leaders lent wisdom and experience, ensuring the movement remained focused and strategic. One poignant moment came during a candlelight vigil held outside the police department, where Lisa addressed the crowd. Her voice was steady, yet filled with emotion as she spoke of healing resilience and the road ahead. We have seen pain and injustice, but we have also seen courage and hope. This movement is bigger than any one of us. It is about the future we want to create together. Let us keep walking forward side by side. The unity forged in Washington Heights became a beacon for change proof that when communities come together, they can reshape the narrative and demand a system that serves all fairly. This chapter in Lisa Freeman's story is a testament to the indomitable human spirit, the power of peaceful protest, and the unwavering belief that justice, though hard-won, is possible. It reminds us that voices raised in solidarity can dismantle walls built on fear and prejudice, forging paths toward a more just and equitable society. The morning sun filtered softly through the high windows of the courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Inside, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. It was the day the trial would begin, a day that held the weight of not just Lisa Freeman's story, but of a community's demand for justice and a system's credibility hanging in the balance. Lisa arrived early, her steps steady, but her heart heavy. She carried the burden of those countless encounters before the incident, moments of silent tension, the microaggressions, the outright dismissals that had shaped her life and career. Yet here she stood, not as a victim, but as a leader ready to testify. The courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions. Family members and supporters filled the gallery, their faces etched with hope and resolve. Journalists from local and national media outlets set up cameras. Microphones poised to capture every word. Across the aisle, the defense team prepared their notes, their expressions a blend of confidence and calculated detachment. The prosecution sat with quiet determination, aware that the evidence and the narrative they constructed would be scrutinized by not just the jury, but the watching world. As the judge called the court to order, a hush fell. The trial had begun. Lisa's testimony was first. She spoke with measured clarity, recounting the fateful moment when Officer James Carter confronted her in the courthouse hallway. Her words painted a vivid picture: the unwarranted suspicion, the dismissive tone, the invasive demands for identification, and finally, the humiliating verbal abuse. "I was shocked," Lisa said, her voice steady, but charged with emotion. "Not because I was being questioned, that is part of my job, but because it felt different this time. The hostility was palpable, the disrespect undeniable, She detailed how she maintained composure, how she refused to let the officer's aggression break her resolve. I knew my rights. I knew the power of my position. But more importantly, I knew that my dignity and the dignity of every person had to be upheld. The prosecution called several witnesses next, including courthouse employees and other officers who had witnessed the exchange. Their testimonies corroborated Lisa's account, describing Carter's behavior as unprofessional and discriminatory. Each statement added layers to the narrative of abuse of power, painting a picture of a system that allowed such behavior to persist. Then came the defense's turn. They sought to challenge Lisa's version of events, attempting to frame the incident as a misunderstanding or routine procedure. Officer Carter was simply doing his job, one defense attorney argued, ensuring the security of the courthouse. But the prosecution was prepared. They highlighted Carter's past complaints of racial bias and misconduct complaints that had been dismissed or ignored. They pointed to a pattern of behavior that could no longer be excused as isolated incidents. Throughout the proceedings, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The jury listened intently, absorbing the testimonies and weighing the evidence. Every word spoken seemed to echo far beyond the walls of the courthouse, resonating with those who had lived similar experiences or who yearned for a system that truly served justice. Between testimonies, Lisa sat quietly, the gravity of the moment settling over her. Yet beneath her calm exterior was a steely determination, a belief that this trial was more than personal vindication. It was a chance to shine a light on systemic issues, to challenge the culture of silence and impunity that had long shielded misconduct. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered. Supporters held signs, their voices rising in chants of solidarity. The trial had become a rallying point, a symbol of resistance against injustice, and a beacon of hope for change. As the first day of the trial drew to a close, the jury was dismissed to deliberate on the testimony presented. The judge's gavel echoed sharply, marking a pause in the legal battle, but signaling the ongoing fight for truth. Lisa's lawyer approached her with a nod of encouragement. "You did well today. The truth is clear, and the world is watching." Lisa nodded her eyes, reflecting both exhaustion and resolve. This is just the beginning. The courtroom drama had unfolded with intensity, revealing not just one story, but the deep fractures within a system struggling to confront its own failures. The day's events set the stage for a trial that would test the limits of justice, the courage of individuals, and the power of collective demand for accountability. This trial was no longer just about one officer's actions or one woman's courage. It was a mirror held up to society, challenging everyone to confront uncomfortable truths and envision a future where justice is not selective, but universal. The courtroom was silent, but for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional clearing of throats. Tension hung in the air as the trial entered a pivotal moment, one that none present could have anticipated. The doors swung open, and in walked General Marcus Davis, a 4-star military officer and a respected figure in the community. His presence was commanding, yet humble, and all eyes turned toward him. Marcus Davis had known Lisa Freeman for years. They had crossed paths during their service in the military, sharing battles, victories, and hardships. His unexpected appearance in this courthouse on this day was about to shake the foundations of the trial and leave a lasting impression on everyone present. As he approached the stand, the judge nodded solemnly, acknowledging the gravity of this moment. Marcus took a deep breath and began his voice steady, but carrying the weight of years of reflection and regret. I stand here not just as a witness, but as a man who recognizes the deep flaws within the system we serve. Marcus said, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom. I am here today to apologize not only to Lisa Freeman, but to every individual who has suffered under injustice, masked by authority. His words carried a raw honesty that rippled through the room. It was a public admission from someone of immense stature, someone who had been part of an institution often viewed as infallible. The weight of his apology was profound. I have witnessed, and in some ways, been complicit in a culture that allowed prejudice and discrimination to thrive. I failed to speak out to protect those who deserved respect and fairness, Marcus continued. For that I am truly sorry. Lisa listened carefully, her eyes fixed on Marcus. There was no anger, no bitterness, only a profound recognition of the courage it took to speak such truth. This was not just an apology. It was a call for accountability and change. The courtroom remained silent, absorbing the moment. For many, this was more than just testimony. It was a symbolic turning point. Here was a leader acknowledging the systemic failures that had allowed injustice to persist, breaking the silence that often surrounds such issues. The prosecution seized this opportunity, using Marcus's words to reinforce their case. They underscored the need for systemic reform and emphasized that the problem extended beyond individual misconduct. It was embedded in the culture and practices of the institution. Defense attorneys found themselves momentarily unsettled, faced with a respected figure directly challenging the narrative of their client's innocence and the institution's integrity. The unexpected ally had shifted the tide, placing the trial in a broader societal context. After his testimony, Marcus was met with a mix of emotions. Supporters of Lisa expressed relief and hope, while skeptics were forced to confront the uncomfortable reality he exposed. His appearance was a reminder that the struggle for justice was complex and required voices from within to drive change. In the days that followed, the impact of Marcus Davis's apology resonated beyond the courtroom walls. Community leaders, activists, and citizens engaged in dialogue about the broader implications. Media outlets highlighted the significance of a high-ranking officer publicly admitting fault-sparking debates on institutional accountability. Lisa, too, felt the weight and the hope of this moment. It was a reminder that change was possible, but required bravery from those who experienced injustice and from those willing to confront uncomfortable truths. As the trial pressed on Marcus's testimony, remained a beacon, a challenge to everyone involved to seek justice, not just for Lisa, but for all who had been wronged by a system resistant to change. This act of apology, and expected, underscored the human element within the machinery of justice. It reminded all that beyond policies and procedures, it was people's lives and dignity at stake. And it called for a reckoning, a new chapter in the pursuit of fairness and equality. In the quiet moments after the courtroom emptied, Lisa reflected on the significance of what had just transpired. The road ahead remained long and fraught with challenges, but with allies like Marcus Davis stepping forward, there was a renewed sense of purpose, a conviction that justice, while delayed, could still be achieved. The courtroom buzzed quietly after General Marcus Davis's heartfelt apology. But beneath that moment of solemnity, a darker story was unfolding, one that revealed the deep-rooted failures embedded within the very system meant to protect and serve. This was the story behind the badge, where power too often goes unchecked, and voices of the oppressed remain unheard. At the center of this storm was Officer James Carter, a man whose record told a tale of ignored complaints and a system unwilling to hold its own accountable. James Carter, 40 years old, had been a police officer for over a decade in Washington Heights. To the public, he was just another figure in uniform, but behind closed doors, his reputation was far from spotless. Over the years, multiple complaints had been filed against him. Accusations ranging from racial profiling to excessive use of force. Yet none had ever led to meaningful disciplinary action. The records quietly tucked away in bureaucratic files painted a picture of repeated misconduct brushed under the rug. One might wonder how such a man could continue to serve without consequence. The answer lay in a system riddled with cracks, where silence and loyalty often trumped justice. The police department's internal affairs unit responsible for investigating such complaints had long been hampered by institutional pressures. Officers protecting officers created an atmosphere where reporting wrongdoing was discouraged, and whistleblowers faced subtle retaliation. The culture within the department was one of camaraderie, but also of unspoken rules. Loyalty to the badge was paramount, sometimes at the expense of truth and fairness. Carter's colleagues, though, aware of his problematic behavior, chose to remain silent. After all, questioning one of their own was risky, threatening careers and reputations. This oath of silence, often referred to as the blue wall, shielded many like Carter from accountability. Comparing Carter's case to other high-profile incidents around the country exposed a troubling pattern. Nationwide, countless officers with histories of complaints have avoided serious repercussions. The cases of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others spotlighted similar systemic failures, where internal investigations failed to prevent repeated abuses. In Washington Heights, this failure was painfully visible. Community members, especially people of color, had long complained about the lack of trust and the persistent fear of unjust treatment by law enforcement. The incident with Lisa Freeman was not an isolated event. It was a manifestation of the department's deeper issues. When the internal affairs investigation into Carter finally began, it was clear that the process would be complicated. The investigators faced a tangled web of politics and protectionism. Evidence that could have led to swift action was delayed, reports were minimized, and interviews were conducted with an air of formality, but little real scrutiny. Inside the police department, whispers circulated. Some officers expressed frustration, while others dismissed the investigation as a mere formality, a box to check off. The department's leadership was caught between public pressure and the resistance from within. The weight of maintaining public trust clashed with the reluctance to expose internal corruption. Community activists and legal advocates pushed relentlessly, demanding transparency and accountability. Their efforts highlighted how systemic failures created an environment where officers like Carter operated with near impunity. They called for reforms that would dismantle the protective barriers, shielding misconduct, and build genuine mechanisms for oversight. At the heart of the issue was a flawed system that prioritized preserving its image over protecting the citizens it was sworn to serve. This system allowed officers with troubling histories to remain on duty, often escalating the harm done to vulnerable communities. Throughout this period, Lisa Freeman's leadership became a beacon of hope. As the new police chief, she was committed to confronting these systemic issues head-on. Her vision extended beyond the courtroom and into the very fabric of the department, aiming to foster a culture of accountability and respect. In boardroom meetings and strategy sessions, Lisa worked tirelessly to reform the internal affairs process. She advocated for independent oversight, improved training on bias, and use of force and policies that encouraged officers to speak out against misconduct without fear of reprisal. Her efforts drew resistance. Some officers saw her reforms as a threat to their traditions and authority. Tensions flared, but Lisa remained undeterred, fueled by the knowledge that the community's trust depended on real change. Parallel to her internal fight, the legal team representing Lisa prepared to expose Carter's history during the trial. They meticulously gathered evidence of his past complaints, highlighting how each ignored warning sign was a failure of the system. The courtroom became a battleground, not only for justice for Lisa, but also for the community's demand for systemic change. The prosecution portrayed Carter's case as emblematic of a culture in need of overhaul, where unchecked power had led to repeated abuses and shattered lives. Defense attorneys argued fiercely, attempting to isolate Carter's actions from the department's culture. But the weight of evidence, coupled with testimonies from former officers and community members, painted a stark picture of systemic dysfunction. As the trial unfolded, media coverage intensified, bringing national attention to the story. Experts and activists weighed in, using the case to discuss broader issues of policing, race, and justice in America. The parallels with other cases across the country underscored a chilling truth. Carter's story was not unique, but part of a widespread problem that demanded urgent reform. Behind the badge lay a system struggling to reconcile its mission with its reality. The exposure of these systemic failures became a catalyst, igniting conversations on the need for accountability mechanisms that truly worked. For the community of Washington Heights, this was a moment of reckoning, a painful but necessary confrontation with the realities of policing. For Lisa Freeman, it was a test of her leadership and commitment to transforming a system long plagued by mistrust. The trial and its revelations served as a mirror, reflecting the fractures in the institution and the urgent need for healing and rebuilding. Ultimately, the story of James Carter and the systemic failures exposed behind the badge was a call to action for law enforcement policymakers and society as a whole. It was a reminder that justice is not merely about individual cases, but about creating a fair and accountable system that protects everyone equally. As the courtroom drama continued to unfold, the world watched closely, hoping that this chapter would mark the beginning of a new era, one where integrity, transparency, and justice prevail over silence, protectionism, and injustice. As the courtroom drama finally began to draw to a close, the weight of the journey was heavy on everyone involved. Lisa Freeman, standing strong, yet visibly weary, knew that this case was not just about her. It was about a system long overdue for transformation. Her fight had become a beacon of hope, not only for her community in Washington Heights, but for all those who had felt marginalized and silenced by the very institution meant to protect them. The lessons from this chapter were profound, woven deeply into the fabric of the community's collective consciousness. Justice was no longer a distant ideal. It had become a tangible demand for accountability, transparency, and fairness. But beyond the courtroom victories or setbacks, the true victory lay in the awareness sparked among ordinary people, law enforcement officers and policymakers alike. Lisa often reflected on the journey, not just the personal trials, but the broader implications. "This is about more than me," she would say in interviews and speeches, her voice steady with conviction. It's about the kind of society we want to build, one where every person is treated with dignity, regardless of the color of their skin or the uniform they wear. The fight against systemic racism and abuse of power was far from over. It was a continuous struggle, requiring vigilance and courage from every sector of society. But the case had shown that change was possible when people came together. When victims spoke out, communities rallied allies within the system, stood firm, and the media shone a light on injustice. Responsibility. Lisa believed was shared. Not only the police, but citizens, elected officials, and institutions all had a role in shaping a fairer future. Education about bias and history, reforming recruitment and training practices, establishing independent oversight bodies. These were no longer just suggestions, but urgent necessities. In Washington Heights, grassroots organizations had grown stronger, fueled by renewed energy and hope. Community leaders organized workshops, dialogue sessions, and advocacy campaigns, empowering residents to hold their leaders accountable. Schools incorporated lessons on civil rights and social justice, nurturing the next generation's awareness and empathy. At the police department, changes were slowly taking root. New policies aimed at rooting out bias, enhancing transparency, and protecting whistleblowers were introduced. Lisa worked tirelessly to create a culture where officers understood that true strength came from integrity and respect, not intimidation or silence. Yet challenges remained. Resistance from entrenched interests, political pressures, and the slow pace of bureaucracy tested everyone's resolve. But Lisa's message never wavered. Progress was built step by step, and each voice mattered. In one memorable community meeting, Lisa stood before a packed room. "We are writing a new chapter," she said, her eyes scanning the diverse faces before her. "A chapter where justice isn't selective, where power is held accountable, and where every person's humanity is recognized. This is our moment to change the story." The crowd erupted in applause, the energy palpable. It was a moment of unity and determination, a testament to the power of collective action. As the sun set over Washington Heights, Lisa walked through the neighborhood, greeted warmly by residents. Children played in the streets, elders shared stories on porches, and the spirit of resilience filled the air. This community, scarred yet hopeful, was ready to face the future with strength. The story of Lisa Freeman and her fight was a reminder that the path to justice was complex but necessary. It called on each individual to reflect on their own role in perpetuating or dismantling systems of oppression. It challenged leaders to act decisively and honestly, and it inspired a society to believe in the possibility of transformation. In the end, justice was not a destination, but a journey, one that required courage, persistence, and unwavering hope. Lisa and her community had lit a flame, a beacon for others to follow. Their story was a call to all to write a new chapter where fairness and equality are not just aspirations, but realities lived every day. This was the lesson learned, the hope nurtured. A new chapter was being written, and its pages held the promise of a better tomorrow. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to the truth many want to hide, don't just listen and forget. Hit that subscribe button now. Because silence is complicity, and the fight for justice needs every voice, including yours. Remember, the real danger isn't just the injustice itself, it's the world's willingness to look the other way. Don't be part of the problem. Be the change. Subscribe. Speak out and never let stories like this fade into the shadows.